Hi, thanks for joining this video. My name is Dr. Deborah Dean, and I would like to talk to you about workplace spirituality, nurturing your soul at work. I'm super excited about this topic. In fact, I've spent well over a year doing research on workplace spirituality for my own dissertation, as well as practically applying these concepts and theories in the workplace. And as a result, I found that my department had some of the highest scores of employee engagement in the company. So what I would love to do is teach you or share with you these ideas, these very easy, practical ways to shape your culture into a culture that does nourish the soul of your employees at work, a culture where they would like to come to work, a culture where they are feeling fulfilled, connected, they know their purpose at work, they have meaning in their job. So let's jump right in to this presentation. It is a bit long, but I hope you will get a lot out of it. Okay. All right. Again, my name is Dr. Deborah Dean. I have a PhD in organizational leadership from Regent University. My dissertation was titled Religion and Spirituality in the Workplace, a Quantitative Evaluation of Job Satisfaction and Organizational Commitment. Emotionally exhausted and morally bankrupt. Does that sound like anything you might be familiar with? This is a phrase that came out of a 1970s television show called MASH. You might be familiar with it, but now this is a phrase that really describes this era that we're living in, this era where we want authentic leaders. And an era that we just feel like our values don't align with other people or other organizations, or we're just tired. We're working so much that by the time we get home to our loved ones, we are emotionally exhausted and just morally bankrupt. So some research shows that each era has its own leadership theory that develops in response to the need of the time and the interests of both practitioners and researchers. And perhaps authentic leadership is one that we need today. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about servant leadership and spiritual leadership as well. But this need in our workplaces, in our families, in our schools, our churches, this need to have a business leader that has strong values, integrity, and leads with purpose. We desperately need that. So why is this important? And what does it mean to me? As an employee, I want to know that my leaders have values and integrity. And I want to know what my job means. What is my purpose for coming to work every day? In this presentation, we have several learning objectives. The first is to introduce the concept of workplace spirituality. I want to review some of the research that is available. I also want to take a look at our current state of affairs to see why we are in the shape that we're in. And then we need to discuss the difference between religion and spirituality. For some, it means the same thing, and for others, it's quite different. So to kick us off, what companies are spiritual? And is this a term that you would want associated with your company? In my research, I found all of these company names. And some of the ones that might pop out and you think, yep, that makes sense, might be Chick-fil-A, Hobby Lobby. Those are companies that they close on Sunday. So they're associating that actually more with religion. It's a Christian-based organization. And I would say that all Christian-based or all religious-based organizations should be spiritual. But there are spiritual companies that aren't necessarily religious. So let me give you an example here. Let's see, Starbucks. They have a different culture. When you go to Starbucks, you feel a little bit different They know your name. They write your name on your cup. They fix your drink special just for you, so you feel special when you go to Starbucks. What others? Greystone Bakery. I love doing research on this bakery. He talks about how he uses sinful desserts for a saintly cause. He gives all of his profits to those in need. And what about some of these other ones? Southwest Airlines. They certainly have a unique and distinct culture. If you fly on Southwest Airlines, you know it's different from other airlines. And if you work at Southwest Airlines, you're empowered. You can make decisions. The company supports you. Love, L-U-V, is written on their plane. It's one of their value statements. And that's a spiritual company. And all of these other ones have some aspect of a spiritual component to their business. Even U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel was in a 1950s magazine, Fortune magazine, where the author talked about U.S. Steel using prayer time to help employees connect at work. And as a result, they had 0 strikes during that time. And Tyson Chicken actually brings in chaplains to stand alongside employees on the factory line and pray with them and counsel them and help them with their spiritual needs. So what is spirit and spirituality? If I say spirit, what do you think of? For some, like I said, they might initially think of God or a higher being. Others might think of the creator of the world, a meaning, a purpose, inner life, this feeling of connection, a source of energy. We'll talk here in a minute about where do you get your energy. Spirituality embraces values, but it still goes far beyond values. I'm going to read this to you. There's a spiritual awakening in the American workplace. In the 1990s, more than 300 titles on workplace spirituality flooded the bookstores. Many corporations are encouraging the development of this new trend because they believe a humanistic work environment creates a win-win situation for both employees and the organization. If members of an organization are happy, they will be more productive, more creative, and more fulfilled. Personal fulfillment and high morale are closely linked to outstanding performance and therefore have a direct impact on an organization's financial success. But a dispirited workplace can manifest itself in low morale, high turnover, burnout, frequent stress-related illness, and rising absenteeism. The events of September 11th, 2001 have further contributed to a re-examination of the nature and meaning of work by many Americans and the emergence of both a more personal and widespread spirituality. Despite the definite link between religion, spirituality, ethics, they are quite different. A clear definition of the boundaries of spirituality has been elusive. For this reason, public agencies have been reluctant to follow suit for fear of violating the principle of church and state separation. And I want you to know that when I talk about spirituality, a lot of people initially think religion and they shut down. But that's not necessarily what we're talking about. So please stay with me through this presentation. Let me show you the original magazine article, 1953 Fortune magazine. In this magazine, the article was titled Businessmen on Their Knees. And it talked about several companies, many that were on the list I showed you earlier. Several companies using different types of spiritual practices to help their business. In 1970, Robert Greenleaf developed the servant leadership theory. The servant leadership theory is where we turn this idea of leader and follower on its head, and we think of the leader as the servant. The leader is there to serve their employees, to help them with whatever issues, whatever goals they have. Sometimes they may not be business related, but the servant leadership is there to serve first. In 2000, the transcendental leadership theory was developed. Then we have 2001, Fortune magazine again, on their title cover page, God and Business. This was a follow-up article to the original 1953. But again, look at this, the surprising quest for spiritual renewal in the American workplace, 2001. In 2003, Dr. Fry developed the spiritual leadership theory. We'll talk quite a bit about this theory. 2007, Bill George created the authentic leadership theory. So can you see how theories are being developed in response to our time, in response to our era? We need leaders that can nurture the souls of employees. We need leaders with high morale, ethical character, integrity. Currently, workplace spirituality is considered a new and emerging field of study, and it's one of the fastest growing areas of new research and inquiry by scholars and practitioners alike. So what is this? What is workplace spirituality? Well, unfortunately, there's not an agreed upon definition just yet, which is that's what usually happens with new theories. But let me give you a few examples. Jackalone and Jerkowitz define it as a framework of organizational values evidenced in the culture that promote employees' experience of organizational transcendence through the work process, facilitating their sense of being connected to others in a way that provides feelings of completeness and joy. Connectedness and joy. Those are great feelings for employees. I wonder if you did a quick survey at your workplace. Do your employees feel complete? Do they feel connected? Do they feel joy? Do they want to feel that? Another definition here, workplace spirituality is the recognition that employees have an inner life which nourishes and is nourished by meaningful work taking place in the context of community. So our inner life, our soul, the core being of what makes us up, and it's nourished by having meaningful work and a sense of community. And again, Ashmos and Duchamp, which are some of the pioneers of the research for workplace spirituality, say it's recognition of an inner life that nourishes and is nourished by meaningful work that takes place in the context of community. So what does it feel like to be spiritual? What do you feel like if you go for a hike in the mountains, or maybe you sit on a beach with the ocean waves crashing against the sand and the hot sun beating down on you? Do you feel spiritual? Does that energize you? Maybe you like to take a walk through nature, or you like to read a good book. Some people like to do yoga. But what does it feel like to be spiritual? These are some of the words that have come up in my research. This a feeling of awareness, balanced, being creative or content, being energized and joyful, mindful, peaceful. Would you want to work in an environment such as this? Is it possible for our workplaces to feel like this? If it did, do you think this type of workplace would feel better and have more energy? Beneful, Fry, and Geigel wrote, employees are no longer content to park their souls at the door. People sought to bring their whole selves, body, mind, heart, and soul to work. How many times have we been told, leave your agenda at the door, leave your personal issues at the door. Just come to work with your mind and your body and leave your heart and soul elsewhere. No longer is that an okay thing to do. Gallup, which you're probably familiar with, conducted research on over 80,000 managers for over 25 years. And they wrote, pay and benefits are like tickets to the ballpark. They can get you into the game, but they can't help you win. We need more than just pay and benefits. We need much more. Fry and Nieswitz said, as the 2-decade trend to spend more time at work increases, we actively seek opportunities for meaning, purpose, and a sense of connection and belonging from our work. Isn't that true? We spend most of our life, our waking moments, in the workplace. Most of our good years, where we have an able body, an able mind, money, we're in the workplace. We need to have meaning, purpose, and connection. And this trend has been identified as the spiritual awakening in the American workplace. It's time. It's time for this. It's also been noted as today's greatest megatrend. And Mitroff and Zenton said that people are hungry for ways in which to practice spirituality in the workplace without offending their coworkers or causing acrimony. They believe strongly that unless organizations learn how to harness the whole person and the immense spiritual energy that is at the core of everyone, they will not be able to produce world-class products and service. So the research shows if we nourish the soul at work, if we provide meaningful work and a sense of community and purpose, there are workplace outcomes, lots of positive workplace outcomes for the employer. So let's take a look at the current state of affairs. Where are we and how did we get here? Well, we have more generations in the workplace than ever before. It's quite possible you may have somebody in the silent generation or traditionalist era, but you very likely have baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and maybe even some Gen Zs coming in the door now. So there's the struggle that we've talked about for a while now. How do we get all of these generations to work together in an effective way? And then, did you know, according to Harvard, there are more religions in America than any other nation on the planet? Now, how did this happen? Our country is just over 240 years old. This is a country that was based on Christianity. But how did that happen? Now we have more religions than any other country. We'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the thoughts was that there's a curiosity of Pacific Rim cultures. With the introduction of yoga and meditation, there's this innate curiosity about what's out there. And then Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We'll talk through this quite a bit, but I love using this diagram. I think it just helps to understand why we are where we are today. And what about the immorality in business? Enron, Arthur Andersen, Wells Fargo, even Martha Stewart. You could do research and find tons of examples of scandalous activity. Or the tumultuous social and business changes. How many of you have been impacted by downsizing or layoffs or offshoring or restructuring or whatever they want to call it these days? But there's uncertainty in knowing, will I have a job tomorrow? And there's uncertainty in knowing, should I dedicate time to this place? Should I be loyal to this place? How will they treat me? And then the workplace has become our primary source of community. Years ago, we used to have time to meet with our neighbors and have barbecues or picnics, to attend churches and have fellowship gatherings at church. Maybe we were involved in civic groups and we volunteered and we were active with different groups. We had extended families and we just felt connected. We felt connected at home, in our family, our extended family, our neighborhood, our schools, our workplace. But that's different today because we're spending so much time in the workplace. That's different now. We don't have time. We don't have the energy to go elsewhere to socialize. You see, decades ago, scientists thought that by 2030, we would only need a 15-hour work week because technology would be there to help us, replace humans in the workplace. We could just work 15 hours and still get a good paycheck. I'm not so sure that's going to happen, though. What I see now is the motto of work more with less. So we have fewer people, yes, but now we have to work longer hours in addition to all of the automation. And do you know that in Japan, the death toll is close to 10,000? And that's up to 1 million white-collar workers are at risk because they work more than 80 hours of overtime a month. 80 hours of overtime a month. They call it death from overwork. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. We need to have boundaries, good, healthy work-life balance. But how do we do it? How do we do it as employees, and how can organizations do it? So let's take a look at us personally. Let's think about this. Are you bored? Depressed? Are you worried about your job? It's painful to be depressed or bored. And it signifies there's a greater spiritual malaise happening when we're no longer passionate, in love, and challenged by what we do. It happens when we're not using our gifts and talents to their full extent, when we're not discovering more about them. This boredom, it's a message to investigate new territory, both inwardly and outwardly. So if you're bored or depressed, perhaps the fire is flickering in your passion. Perhaps you're not using all your skills and talents. We need to figure out how to reignite that. And statistics show that many workers are searching for jobs. Even if they have a job, most people are not satisfied. Most are suffering from burnout, depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems, especially in America. We have more people now than ever on anxiety medicine, some type of depression or mental health issue. And how does the work that we do fit into that? If we're going to work every single day doing the same job and we don't know why, we don't understand the meaning behind it, we don't understand our purpose, how can we be excited? How can we have this sense of fulfillment? How can our soul be nourished? Let's look a little bit deeper at different generations. For some, unfortunately, we'll look at working with different generations as a burden. I want to ask you to take a look at it as an opportunity. And this is why. Each generation has their own set of attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, experiences, and values. We've each lived in a different era. So let's dig into this a little bit. Let's understand more about our history. Maybe start with your own history. Where did your family come from? What trials and tribulations have they faced? So if you go as far back as the traditionalists, 1925 to 1942, they lived through the Great Depression, World War II, the start of vaccinations. Can you imagine the fear this group felt? not having enough food to eat, literally starving to death. The suicide rate was huge back then because people just didn't have enough money. They couldn't provide for their family. Hardship. I teach an economics class, and we talk about the Great Depression and we talk about the Great Recession. And one thing I noticed in my very first class years ago was that students didn't know their story. So please, if you get anything out of this entire presentation, find your story. Go back and find out, where was your family in the Great Depression? And maybe if you don't have access to that information, do some research to find out what happened in the town you live in now. Or go to a nursing home and talk to some people. It's a rare chance that we get nowadays to talk to people of this era, but talk to them and find out their story. It's a painful story, but it's a story of opportunity. It's a story of victory. It's a story that we need to know. And then we have the baby boomers. The baby boomer generation here, Vietnam, the first draft. My dad was a Vietnam War hero. He wasn't drafted, but I can only imagine the suffering they went through being in the war, let alone coming home and not being wanted. Having people spit on you or not giving you a job or just not wanting you. And having that feeling, for many in this generation, it's a feeling they've carried with them their whole life. And there were other things in that era, civil rights movements, women's rights movements, television and computers. There's a lot going on. So again, talk to people, find your story. And then Generation X. This is my generation. I remember starting high school and the Gulf War started. And again, my history was that people were being drafted in Vietnam. Was that going to happen with the Gulf War? I didn't know. As a high school girl, I had no idea if my friends were going to be drafted. It was scary. And then the AIDS epidemic happened. We were scared, literally scared to do anything because we had no idea how that disease was happening for quite some time. And the internet, that was something. In high school, I remember hearing one girl say she was talking to someone in China on her computer. I thought she was crazy. It wasn't until after I got out of high school that I learned what the internet was. And then the millennial generation. This is my children's generation. And unfortunately, they have never in their life had a peacetime. We have been at war for decades. And then the natural disasters are coming. So this fear and uncertainty, it's no wonder we have so many people with anxiety issues. And now the Gen Zers, they've lived through the Great Recession. For my youngest son, this meant relocating to a different state and leaving his family, leaving his brothers and sisters that are all older, and staying with his dad and me in a different state so that we could have jobs. And the war on terror continues. So each generation has their own set of attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs, and experiences and values. And I want to challenge you to not just be tolerant of these differences, but to embrace them. Listen to their stories. Understand what's happened that has shaped these people. Okay, let's move on. Religious diversity in the workplace. If you recall, I mentioned that a Harvard study found that America is now the world's most religiously diverse nation. The study is called the Harvard Pluralism Project, and Diane Eck is one of the leaders in that project. And in this book, Religion in the Workplace by Douglas Hicks, he explains why this has happened. He talks about the different immigration laws throughout the history of the United States. And again, these are laws that most of us probably didn't even realize were there. So let's do a little bit of history. Let's look at our history. Go back, and these are just 3, but if you read the book or do some research online, you'll see immigration acts all throughout our American history. For example, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. The United States of America would not allow Chinese to come to America. The 1924 Immigration Act. The 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. We could talk about all sorts of immigration laws throughout our history. Sometimes they tighten the borders and they don't let anybody in. Other times they let select groups in. Other times they let anybody in. And if you do the research throughout the history, you'll see the cause and effect of those decisions. And since 9/11, when the World Trade Centers were attacked, immigration has opened up in the United States, and we've let more people in than ever. And so now we have more religions in our country than ever before. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just want to state the facts. Look at our history. Do the research. And what we find now is if you go to the shopping center, to the grocery store, to your workplace, to your children's school, in your neighborhood, you very likely have people that look different than you. You have people that have different beliefs and different values. You have people of different religions. This book does a great job explaining how we can do this well in the United States. Douglas Hicks uses India and Singapore as examples because they are 2 countries that also have a lot of different religions. He looks at their different holidays and different symbols, and he talks about the curiosity of other religions. So I would encourage you to get this book. To me, it's a great way to look at diversity. If you have a diversity and inclusion officer in your workplace, which I assume most places do these days, I highly recommend they read this book. It's not just about religion, but it's about respecting everyone. Hicks has a concept he calls respectful pluralism. And the idea is we can respect everyone, not just tolerate, but respect, embrace, look for opportunities with everyone. And in my opinion, we're all different. We're all unique. As an example, I'm female, brown eyes, fairly short. Maybe you're different than me. Probably are. And that's okay. And so it gives us a chance to look at what are our differences and how can we embrace those and respect them and respect each person because we're human beings. So I highly recommend that book. Okay, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I think this picture does a great job of explaining how we have come to this place in life where we have this need for spirituality. And that's a word that's being used more and more. But let me explain. At the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, we have our basic needs. food, water, safety, shelter. So not that everyone's basic needs are met, but in America, the majority have their basic needs met in one way, shape, or another. So once those basic needs are met, and we move up the diagram here to psychological needs. Now think back to those earlier generations. Think back to the traditionalists in the Great Depression when they had no food, when their basic needs of food, water, safety, shelter, if those needs weren't met, that became their focus. That became their purpose. Moving up in the diagram, psychological needs, we have this feeling of prestige, accomplishment, self-respect, and status. I like to attribute this to climbing the corporate ladder. So again, I'm a Gen X. My parents are baby boomers, and they had their basic needs met. You know, I can say that we weren't wealthy, we weren't well-to-do, but they had their basic needs met. They had food, water, safety, shelter. So then it became this idea of we need family and friends and affection and love. Does this sound like maybe the 1960s right here? You know, peace, love, not war. That was one of their mottos. But this goes beyond the 60s. This goes beyond that. The corporate ladder, which is a symbol that I have heard of for a long time, climbing the corporate ladder, was that you would climb each rung to have more prestige, more success, more status. With each level in that ladder, you would make more money, you'd have a better office, a better title. And so it was that sense of status. And then once that is met, you move up to self-fulfillment. And I think this is where we're at today. For many of us, our basic needs are met. We've climbed the corporate ladder, and here we are with our nice office or our good paycheck or our nice car or our nice home, you know, the old phrase, keeping up with the Joneses. We kept up with the Joneses. So now here we are. And we need fulfillment. We need to use all of our skills and talents to achieve our full potential. We need confidence, self-esteem. We need this sense of morality, and we need our leaders around us to have morality. Personal growth, pursuit of knowledge, self-awareness, self-respect. This is our need. And for those of us that are getting some of these needs met, we move into this spiritual need where we look in our inner life. How can we nourish our soul? We're looking for meaning, vision, purpose, hope, faith that there's better out there. And this is where we're at today. Now with this hierarchy, it doesn't mean that we couldn't drop right back to the basics. If something happens in our life, we lose our job or our health fails, we could jump right off into this basic needs again to where these things at the top won't matter anymore. Because this hierarchy, you have to fill each line one at a time. You can't skip anything. And once one of these needs are not met, you go back until that need's met, and then you can continue the climb upward. So I hope that makes sense. I like to use this diagram as a picture of where we are and how we got there. So let's talk about spirituality and religion. I think this is important, again, because of this separation between church and state. And I remember talking about this in my own secular workplace, and someone told me, oh, that's an oxymoron. You can't have spirituality in the workplace. But once you explain it like this, most people will agree. So the Dalai Lama said, religion he takes to be concerned with faith and the claims of one faith, tradition, or another, an aspect of which is the acceptance of some form of heaven or nirvana. Connected with this are religious teachings or dogma, ritual prayer, and so on. Spirituality, he takes to be concerned with those qualities of the human spirit: love, compassion, patience, tolerance, forgiveness, contentment, a sense of responsibility, a sense of harmony, which brings happiness to both self and others. And then Dr. Fry noted here, the Dalai Lama says that while ritual and prayer, along with the questions of heaven and salvation, are directly connected to religion, the inner qualities of spirituality, spiritual survival, and the quest for God, and ultimately joy, peace, and serenity, and commitment to organizations that include and reinforce these qualities need not be. So does your organization include joy, peace, serenity? Let me show you this. This is part of Dr. Fry's model here, where he uses the quest for spiritual survival, specifically vision of life's purpose and meaning, and membership is at the heart of and reflects a common human quest to seek, to know, and do the will of God, the ideal intention of which underlies all historic ideas of God. The quest of God is the quest for an ideal source of help, an object of devotion, a being so much greater, more enduring, and more worthy than ourselves that we may confidently lean on it for support and unreservedly give ourselves to its service. So here's the concept of God as a higher power. And we see on the far left, we have atheism, where there is no God. And typically, there's no sense of calling or membership. And then on the far side, we have pantheism, where all is divine. This is where a lot of people think about Mother Nature. I'm part Cherokee, so I think in the early days with the Native Americans, they didn't know about Christianity, but they knew there was something else out there. They knew there was something bigger than them. I remember meeting with an elder one time, and he said, he's a farmer, and he said, when you look at how you plow the fields and plant the seeds and cover them up and water them, and the sun shines, and the seed starts to break through the ground, and it grows, and eventually you harvest that, and you take the bounty home, and you use that to feed your family. He said, there's no way you can look at that and experience that and not believe there's a God. So this scale shows you the different aspects of where people are with spirituality and religion. But it really boils down to this. Jekyll, Jerkowitz, and Fry said that the matter of religion and spirituality is that spirituality is necessary for religion, but religion is not necessary for spirituality. So they could be synonymous if you're religious. I'm a Christian, so to me they're synonymous. But for many, it may not be. They may just have spiritual experiences. Mitroff and Denton said that spirituality is that basic feeling of being connected with oneself, one complete self, others, in the entire universe. And they said if a single word best describes or captures the meaning of spirituality and the vital role it plays in people's lives, that word is interconnectedness. Interconnectedness. And isn't that true? Don't we go to work and just hope to have some sort of connection with others? Whether it's just a hello or a lunch meeting or some sort of connection. makes the workday so much better. So what do we do with all this information? Well, what I'd like to do is give you a chance to review this. And over the next 40 days, I'm going to send out little practical tips for you to put this in action, to help create a spiritual workplace, a culture that nourishes the soul of your employees. So we're also going to look at followership, servant leadership and spiritual leadership, noble character virtues, the path for greatness, spirituality at work, opportunities, and next steps. The call for action is this. Jackalone and Jerkowitz said the need for organizational leaders to devote attention to spiritual values has likely never been greater. And for many workers, work has taken an ever more prominent and time-consuming place in their lives. As a result, workers' need for connectedness, meaning, purpose, altruism, virtue, nurturance, and hope in one's work and at one's workplace likely is also at an all-time high. This is another book about followership. It's a book or a topic you actually might not be familiar with. It makes sense, though, really. When we go to school, we learn about being a leader. We learn about leadership styles, what it takes to be a good leader. We're even told, don't be a follower. But the reality is, there's probably 80% more followers than there are leaders. So this book looks at followers and how to be a good follower. And although that word sometimes has a negative connotation, it shouldn't. We're all followers. Now we can also be leaders, whether you have a formal job title or not. But we are all followers, and we should learn to do it well. And then leadership styles, we have the task-oriented ones. So thinking back again to the generations, our baby boomers, our silent generation, they probably worked okay with the authoritarian style or the transactional style. These are styles that really just manage the body. You told somebody what to do, and they did it. And when your basic needs are not met, that's okay, because you're there to get a paycheck. You are there to get your basic needs met. But as people have moved up Maslow's hierarchy, their psychological needs are met, and now they're looking at additional needs. We need different types of leadership styles. So this is where we have servant leadership, spiritual leadership, and transformational leadership styles. The servant leader puts the leader on the bottom, and their job is to serve the employee. And when you serve the employee and the employees are happy, they serve their customers. And when the customers are happy, they come back. And then your investors are happy. So it's a great theory on serving others. And truly, the leader takes that role of being servant first. And then spiritual leadership looks at all these ideas of hope and faith and love and vision. It's a holistic leadership style that integrates your body, heart, mind, and spirit. It is a style that nourishes the soul. Spiritual leadership is defined as comprising values, attitudes, and behaviors that are necessary to intrinsically motivate oneself and others so that they have a sense of spiritual survival through calling and membership. And then in return, you have all of these great workplace outcomes: commitment, productivity, profit and sales growth, employee well-being, corporate social responsibility, and there's tons more. My own research, I showed that servant leadership style can predict employee engagement, job satisfaction, and organizational commitment. William James, the founder of modern psychology, said that man's most fundamental need is to be understood and appreciated. It's time for us to go back to respecting the whole person because we're human beings. Looking at each other's differences and embracing them. Looking at it as an opportunity to learn from one another. Using our whole self, body, heart, mind, and soul, to fulfill our purpose and meaning. Dr. Fry and Melissa Neeswich wrote this book, Maximizing the Triple Bottom Line Through Spiritual Leadership. And I highly recommend this book. It's a great book to dive in and take a look at your inner life, how you can be a spiritual leader. They say here that leaders must get in touch with their core values and communicate them to followers through vision and personal actions to create a sense of spiritual survival through calling and membership. So then we talk about values. Take a look at your inner life, at your core being. What are your values? I like to call them virtues. Noble character virtues. What is important to us? You see, inspired leadership is anchored in knowing our life purpose, staying true to the values we hold sacred, and embracing our vision of work as the basis for co-creation in spirit. So, if you look at this list, and I think there's about 100 on this list, pick out 3 or 5 that are important to you. And it's not an all-inclusive list. You could come up with more. But highlight 3 or 5, write them down, that's important to you, that makes you unique, that you wouldn't compromise on. And then if you're married, have your spouse do the same. And match those up and see, are you all trying to have a household in alignment with your virtues? It can make for an interesting conversation. You can also do this exercise with your employees and staff. But most importantly, you need to know this for yourself. What are your virtues? And Dr. Ferguson wrote this book. I love these images that I'll share with you on this next page. It comes from her book. And you see here this spiritual soil. So let's think about this plant. What feeds us spiritually? If this is our soil, and you know that in order to have a plant or a flower, you have to put a seed in the ground, cover it with soil, and water it, and have sunlight. You have to have healthy soil. If the soil's toxic or nutrient deficient, nothing will grow. So what are we feeding our soil? How are we nurturing our soul? And what replenishes our energy? Do you need to take a hot bubble bath? Do you need to take a sabbatical or a vacation? For me, I need at least 1 week a year at the beach. It just rejuvenates me. How often do we tend to our spiritual soil? And think about, what does it look like when our soil is depleted or dry? Are we exhausted? Are we overwhelmed? Are we burned out? Sure. So the spiritual soil is so important. And what if our workplace could nourish our souls at work? These are a few ideas of things that might nourish your soul. Climbing mountains, hiking, listening to music, yoga. Once we have healthy soil, our purpose can come out. This is our focus, determination, and dedication. It's where our goals become clear, where we start to have direction. We know what we're doing and why we're doing it. Purpose helps us find the meaning in what we do. So if your workplace is draining and depleting the nourishment from your soil, how will you know your purpose? We must have healthy soil. And then our roots can sprout and we can find our purpose. When our purpose is clear, our energy will flourish and we'll start to see our passion. We'll start to get excited about what we do. We'll wake up ready to go, waiting for the day so we can live out our passion, our purpose. And the leaves here, each leaf, that represents our gift. And the way leaves convert sunlight to energy, your gifts convert your purpose and passion into your daily life. Through your gifts, you bring purpose and passion to the world. So think about, what have you been gifted with? Maybe you already know your purpose and passion, but it's been hidden because you're not using all your gifts. Your soil's depleted. So think about your gifts, your skills, abilities, your experience. When your purpose is clear and your passion grows, you will best be able to use your gifts as an offering to the world and service. When you work spiritually, your gifts become an offering to make the world a better place. It's not just work to get a paycheck. It's really aligning your gifts with purpose and passion to have spiritual service to others. And the result of this is beauty, right? A beautiful, healthy flower have these petals that make it so beautiful. And when you see people that have a healthy soul and they're living out their purpose in life, they're passionate, and they're sharing all their gifts, all their talents, using all their experience. They're helping others to make the world a better place, and they're so beautiful inside and out. So spirituality at work, what do you love to do? What are you passionate about? What are your gifts and talents? And how can we use all of this to best serve others? Spirituality at work suggests that the only way to do work that is satisfying to the heart, soul, and pocketbook is by knowing the self. When we reject opportunities, tasks, and duties that do not feed our souls and claim more and more part of ourselves and our passion for what interests us, positive, expansive change will come. So this is the opportunity of setting boundaries, to say no. No, that project does not feed my soul. But we first have to know what's at our core. So going back, what is workplace spirituality? It's the organization that gives us a sense of being connected to others and providing feelings of completeness and joy. It's that recognition of an inner life that nourishes and is nourished by meaningful work taking place in the context of community. And we've looked at the opportunities of working with people of different generations, different religions, just different. We've looked at Maslow's hierarchy and our basic needs, our psychological needs. We've looked at the need for morality. We've looked at the issues in our workplace with unethical behavior and tumultuous social and business changes. And we've looked at why we have to turn to our workplace as our primary source of community. So some next steps you might think about. StrengthsFinder. Maybe you've done this, but look at your top 5 strengths. What are you really good at? This is another book, The Extraordinary Leader. They offer another survey that you can take, and others will also take it. I think you need about 30 people to take this survey for you. But you find out what you're really good at. So self-reflection, what are your strengths? What are your values, your virtues? And then pair up with someone. Have an accountability partner, a coach, a mentor, someone to help you figure out what you're good at, what your strengths are, how to nurture your soul, how to find your passion, your purpose, your meaning. In this book, First Break All the Rules, this is a book by Gallup, they have a survey with 12 questions. So this may be a good metric for you to figure out where you're at. But in conclusion, people work with not only their hands, but also their hearts. It's when people work with their hearts or spirit that they find meaning and purpose, a kind of fulfillment that means the workplace can be a place where people can express their whole or entire selves and be fulfilled. Well, that was workplace spirituality. And I hope that it has inspired you to think about work differently. Whether you're a leader or a follower, I challenge you. Learn your history. Look in your core being, your inner life. What makes you the person you are today? What boundaries will you set where you can say no? And how will you nurture your soul? How will you nurture the souls of others so they can begin to find their purpose, their passion, and be a service to others? If I can help, please let me know. And I hope you follow me for 40 days as we share practical ways to create a spiritual workplace. Thank you.